Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Sometimes we're so weighed down when we wake up in the morning. We feel so depressed. We don't have any motivation to get out of bed. Or maybe we've woken up from a dream about the person who hurt us. When you keep waking up like that after a number of years, and I'm referring specifically to trauma depression, not just unexplainable or seasonal depression, but it's specifically from a very traumatic event, some kind of condition or cause of this depression. So you keep waking up like this after a number of years because this is a trauma. It lasts a very long time. Eventually you think to yourself, my God, what happened to me? What happened to my life? My life has been full of struggle and misery this whole time. How long have I been living with this problem? It could have been better. That thing shouldn't have happened. It could have been avoided. My life is ruined. And we get very fixated and attached to that, to this negative story that we've created. And this is not surprising because the human condition is predisposed for desire, and we live in a desire-based culture. We live in a desire, idealistic or perfectionist culture. And we are idealists, hedonists by nature. We're not intrinsically stoic or ascetic. You know, especially in the West, this Western culture of consumerism and, you know, the American dream and pursuing your passions, going for your desires and making the best out of your life, living your best life. There's so much indulgence in it and so much desire. And of course, therefore, this is where the attachment develops the greatest. Most of us don't go out looking to struggle in painful situations so that we can train ourselves to become more resilient. This is a very uncommon concept or way of life. We don't teach this sort of thing in school. We don't teach stoicism. You have to take that as an extracurricular. You have to take philosophy and stuff. It's not the majority worldview. We would prefer to have everything in the world. At the very least, we would prefer that everything was just right and nearly perfect. We're realistic enough that not everything can be perfect in life. But still, that's one of our problems. We don't know how to suffer. We don't know how to receive suffering. And we always think that suffering is a bad thing. So we suffer more because of that. We think, well, it's bad. We shouldn't be suffering. And when we're suffering, this is really bad. It shouldn't be in this situation. So this is, of course, in Buddhism, this is a really harmful mentality. So it's not. Suffering is not necessarily a bad thing as long as it's within reason and, you know, you're able to live sustainably. You're not in a serious illness or life or death situation. We often hear that we should freely express our emotions, for example. Yet suppressing them is in fact far healthier than commonly assumed. And, you know, contemporary psychology has largely concentrated on the immediate outcomes of our emotional patterns. And even doctors too, many doctors believe in the short sighted belief, or the outcomes, results of things like having sex or masturbation. We think it's healthy. We think it's, you know, because studies show it relieves stress and it feels good and it puts us in a good mood, and apparently it helps with self-esteem. But again, this is another short-sighted misconception, because in the long run, what do these things do to you, right? Doctors don't know about vital energy. Doctors don't know about the fourth dimension, the vital body. We have no idea what it's doing. We have very little idea of what it's doing to the nervous system, how it affects the endocrine system long term, right? So same thing with our emotions and the mental substances. Psychologists often don't know what the mind is made of. What is the makeup of the mind, and what is the benefits, or what happens to the mind over time, right? Expressing emotions, there is undeniable value in timely self-expression. It can provide genuine stress relief. Expressing yourself can help relapses into other kinds of addictions, because you, for example, like with desire, letting yourself indulge in desires from time to time in small amounts. It keeps the monsters away, for so to speak. You tame the beast, the inner beast, right? And so that you don't relapse into a really heavy cycle of consuming or having a substance, and or averting to destructive outbursts. If you try to suppress your anger too much, or you practice gray rock around a difficult person or a client as a social worker, you do that too much and you're going to blow up, right? So it's about a balance. So looking further though down the road, the long-term consequences of these habits remain largely unexplored. We have yet to fully grasp the very profound evolutionary potential that disciplined mental training can unlock within the span of a single human life. We have mostly not looked that far ahead. Buddhist teachings speak of the samskaras and the kleshas, and or kleshas, many names for these, the deep-seated impressions and afflictive emotions that form the ego. So through the inevitable challenges of daily life, these conditions, mental conditions, are exercised and tested. Over time, though, this process is beneficial, right? This is how we become resilient. As wisdom develops, these mental structures gradually dissolve if we train ourselves, right? This is what is truly healthy for us in the end. Going through the obstacles of life, the psychological gymnasium, as Master Samael describes it, training ourselves to become more resilient. And this dissolution of aggregates liberates our consciousness to allow our mind to evolve into lesser and lesser conditioned, more refined states, a cleaner quality of mind. The essential practice lies in finding that proper balance between self-expression, because we have to work at the level we're at. We can't go cold turkey, right? We can't cut our addictions cold turkey, and our emotions and our self-expression is an addiction. So that balance between self-expression and self-restraint. Because with the way that we live nowadays, our constant everyday self-expression is only making our egos bigger and fatter. We are not getting better by expressing ourselves like this. We are only strengthening our addiction to that satisfying feeling of shouting back at people when we're angry, or indulging in things when we're craving. But real growth requires that we develop emotional restraint, through which the mind can evolve and move closer to enlightenment. And this development happens in stages. You don't have to perfect the jhanas before you try cultivating self-restraint and forbearance. Sometimes we just have to bear down and hold back our emotions to maintain civility in social settings, or we have to just put up with inconveniences in order to develop patience and equanimity. Now, going back to the problem of suffering, another thing we should be aware of, but something we should consider, is just how much awareness we have about the things that are going on in this planet. Are we putting things into perspective? Because if you look around and really pay attention to the things that are happening to people, not just in second and third world countries, but right here at home, you will see the reality. The reality is that in this day and age, suffering is more pervasive than it ever has been. So we may be able to create that perfect life that we want, the most ideal thing that we've dreamt of, but usually not without having gone through some very difficult thing like child abuse in the process. And these things are happening more and more over the century because that is the karma of this planet right now. It's been getting worse since the 1950s, since the Industrial Revolution, since the Boomer Age, the Sexual Revolution, and since internet pornography. Our quality of life has been declining. These movements are no longer within right livelihood, so they are coming with tremendous consequences. If you pay attention and look around, it doesn't take long before you notice how pervasive suffering really is. It's in the lyrics of all of the music we listen to. If you don't believe the suffering music, just listen to bands like Korn or Bring Me the Horizon, all these death metal bands and hard rock, or Nine Inch Nails. Jonathan Davis, for example, was physically abused. He was sexually assaulted at a very early age. He was bullied in school. So his ordeals were so heavy that he founded his entire career on his suffering. It's extremely sad because many artists and musicians do this. They have gone through some really overwhelming things, and but they happen to have a creative spark. They have something to write about, but it's very difficult living for them. But it's at the same time, it's a work for their careers. These people have had some of the worst psychological health in spite of their material fame and success. Who do you know is suffering right now? Every second person you meet these days has been through at least one really, really bad thing that completely overwhelmed them, and it took them years to get over. 1 in 4 people in North America regularly experience acute anxiety and panic attacks and take prescription medication for it. And the same ratio applies to depression too. How many people do you know have chronic irritable depression? How many people do you know have chronic irritable bowel syndrome or get migraines regularly? All the pain we see in this world is supposed to happen at this time, and that's because we are at that time. And if you read books like The Aquarian Message or The Doomed Aryan Race by Samuel Onbaor, it all comes together. And you have to kind of look at the statistics too. I mean, just watch the news. Look at all the crazy things that are happening. The corruption is unbelievable, unprecedented. People think that we've had wars for centuries and we've had problems for centuries, but really it's just been getting worse and worse over the decades. Now, with social media and technology, and overpopulation, things are getting way more complicated and way more difficult and painful. But let's face the reality, because you're not alone. When you're young, a trauma might happen to you, and at first you may not understand, or you might think that you can handle it, that you can just let it go. But then your mind dwells on the events, and later on you realize what happened. But it's too late to turn back. So the trauma grows heavier and heavier as you realize that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do something about it, to stand up for yourself, to fight back, to use your voice, but you didn't. You hesitated, or you were too young, you couldn't speak up, something like that, right? So when you go through something horrible like child abuse or sexual abuse, or something overwhelming like bullying or a terrible betrayal or someone cheating on you, even if it's in high school can be the worst, actually, because you're too young to handle it. So even if it seems like a small thing to the adults, like it really is like the end of the world for a teenager, because they're too perfectionist, they're insecure, they take things too seriously. And especially in the West, but pretty much everywhere these days, tradition says that you're supposed to speak up, or to speak out, to fight back, to take revenge, and you should. And if you didn't, then you're a wimp, you're effeminate, you're not a man, and this is really harmful. And so when we fail to do that, we suffer even more. And for us, it's just too much to handle, too much to let go all at once. This is what life is like without proper holistic healing practices for the mind. And this is what life is like when we don't have right view. We don't have a way of, a more civilized way of dealing with our problems. This is modern times. The good news is there is a solution. There is one great benefit and necessity to suffering, and that is spiritual growth. And we are very lucky, extremely fortunate to discover this, because it's been, the teaching has been, more and more distorted and lost over the centuries, and we're just kind of rediscovering it again in modern times with the internet and books and stuff, rediscovering something that was taught thousands of years ago, meditation and Buddhism. So, nobody wants to undergo trauma. Nobody wants to admit that they carry a miserable past that ruined their childhood for almost a decade or maybe longer. But as spiritual people, just remember, the only way to progress spiritually, the only way to grow the conscience is to remove the conditioning that it carries. And that process is always painful in one way or another, or it's at least, at the very least, inconvenient. Because any creature or soul with a conditioned mind, with ego, carries karma. And when we pay that karma, we do so through suffering. So this is something we should be grateful for. The Buddha said that all pain comes from desire, and all happiness comes from serving others. And for many lifetimes, we have put energy into motion by feeding desire, so we are feeling the consequences of our previous actions. We've lived many lives, and we're in Kali Yuga, the Dark Age. It's not easy to practice in this day and age. His Holiness the Dalai Lama interviewed a monk who was exiled from Tibet after the Chinese had invaded. He was imprisoned for 15 years. He was beaten and he was tortured. So he went through the traumas of that time and place. And so the Dalai Lama asked what was the greatest danger when he was in prison. And this monk's response was simply losing my compassion for the Chinese. So can you imagine how devoted he was to maintaining, his ethics, his upright view and love and compassion for others in such a treacherous time of his life, where you'd think that he'd be most concerned about himself and full of anger or rage or fear. And somewhere in the interview, Dalai Lama said to the monk that, it would have been easier to practice spirituality in that prison than it is to practice here at home at this meditation retreat. Because at that time, he really had something substantial to work on. His consciousness had something to feel. When I first began meditating on my youth trauma, after a few insights that my Tathagata told me through dream text, the consciousness needs something to feel. Master Samael explained a similar thing. He said, a mind that is at service of one's real being results in an effective instrument. The mind is made to be receptive, not as an active instrument. If someone hurts us, we must not permit the mind to react, wish that there will always be someone who can hurt us in our feelings daily, so that we can in that way train our mind to better to be passive. The more insults we receive, the better for our training. Keep in mind that the pain of paying karma doesn't last very long when you compare it to the millions of lives you've already lived. Enlightenment can be attained in one life after all. Typically, the worst ordeals happen in the formative years, in our youth. A lot of the time it happens right around the teenage years, or even before that. And after you pass that stage, typically everything else is smooth sailing and minor, and you can handle it. You're watching this video because you already went through the pain of childhood trauma, and that's one of the worst experiences most people go through these days. So now that you're almost past that, it's just a matter of digesting those impressions from the past so you can move forward. We all have to work on ourselves at some point. How can you work on your pride if you've been feeding it your whole life and can't remember any times when you didn't stand up for yourself or embarrass yourself? How can you work on your sorrow and grief if you've never failed miserably at something or lost a loved one? So therefore, meditation is the right thing to do. It's the proper way to heal the mind. It's the way that our mind was intended to function, with serenity and alertness. And if you want to learn how to meditate, I have full meditation lessons in my playlist, Mindfulness and Meditation, where it's titled something like that, Meditation and Mindfulness. And there are a few different, I teach the primary styles. There's mindfulness or serenity, Mahamudra meditation, as well as Vipassana or insight meditation. Sabbe Satta Sukhi Hontu.